Okay, everyone. Well, welcome, big welcome to Learning Technologies 2014. Great keynote, I'm sure you'll agree, those of you that saw it. Brian Solis gave us lots to think about, and actually a great start to our first session. So for those of you who haven't seen me at these events, this is actually, I'm ashamed to say, my 16th event as well. So I was here from year dot, initially in the exhibition hall doing lunch and learns up in here in the lunchtime, but then progressed to conference speaking and ultimately to sitting in the chair and introducing great speakers. I'm Kathy Morris. I now run my own consultancy, but have had global learning and development roles for organisations like Thomson Reuters, Hayes, the recruitment company, and so on. So very much my world as well as yours, and one that we all are incredibly passionate about. So just to clarify, track 3 is a little bit different to the other tracks because it's got some strategic stuff in it, but primarily it's all about real life stories of people like you who are trying to implement this stuff in the real world with all the challenges that we're facing and all the things that we've been hearing about that are going to be coming our way. So really great opportunity to hear about other people's pain, which is always good, and also their success stories and how they've made things work. And we're kicking off with 2 really great speakers, and I'm really excited to introduce the Learning Strategy session, which is the first of track 3 today. So if you didn't think you were coming to talk about learning strategy, now's your chance to backtrack out and go find the one you thought you were in. This is in 2 parts, very much around the change in learning at work and very much to the sort of things we were hearing from Brian earlier, who I think the quote was, you need to step up to the challenges we face, and that's what both Nigel and Suzanne are going to talk to us about. Just very briefly, we've got Nigel who's going to talk to us much more about the strategy for keeping up with efficiency and rapid change, and I'll say a little bit more about him in a minute. And we've also got Suzanne Peacock, who's from Diageo, where they're really at the beginning of starting to implement some of the changes that we would all like to be able to do in our organisations. So she'll be coming up behind a more broad brush approach with something a little bit more specific. Fire exits are there and there, just to let you know. This session goes on for an hour, and then we will be breaking for lunch for an hour and a half, and that's your chance to get to the exhibition. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nigel Paine. Again, a very familiar face, I'm sure, to many of you. Obviously, from way back, the BBC was where we first started coming into contact. Nigel used to talk about case studies from the BBC, and we used to see him at this conference. He is now very much out there in the consulting world. He's currently writing a book all around learning challenge, and a lot of what he talks about today will be in that. He's also set up a network for the Learning and Performance Institute for CLOs. It's called CLO Connect, as well as, amongst other things, teaching on a doctorate program at the University of Pennsylvania on future-based learning. So I think you'll agree, very well equipped to step up and tell us all how it should be done, Nigel.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much, Kathy. I'm a warm-up guy for Suzanne. That's really my role today. Kathy, I never realized, if you've been here 16 years, that they allow primary school kids into this conference. It's extraordinary. Brian set me up a bit. That slide, that really good slide that he said about the future of corporate learning, I'll just read bits of it. I can't, if I'd have been smarter, I would have it up on the screen for you, but I just have to read it. What he said is a couple of things that are quite interesting. Traditional learning models will finally die. And then he said, attention will be paid to the needs of each learner, and new models focus on mobile. I actually think Brian doesn't know the half of it, or isn't claiming the half of it in those statements, radical as they might seem. And I want to just elaborate what I'm calling and pronouncing very carefully the big shift in learning. And I think we're going to see some radical transformations. This is the case study track, really. So I'm the odd one out, in a sense. But if you want a little micro case study, I just talked to Nick Shackleton-Jones from BP outside. And he said to me, you know, I really have to do breakthrough all the time now. I'm in a permanent state of anxiety. And what I replied to him was, Nick, so is BP. That is the new normal. He is trying to respond to a company going through massive transition, and he's not going to do that brilliantly by just the same old, what we did last year, what seemed to work 3 years ago. So everything is new, everything is breakthrough, everything is trying to shift the company in a major way aligned with the business. He is representative, I think, of many, many people trying to grapple with learning issues in corporate, not just UK, US, Canada, Brazil, all the kind of places I've been to in the last 6 months. Nothing is different. No country is escaping this. This is a big shift. I said it carefully again. And what I want to do is just explain that in a little kind of metaphorical way. This is England against Scotland last year. It was the FA anniversary. I was at the match. The last one before that was 23 years before, when the Scottish supporters stole the goalposts and dug up half the Wembley pitch and immediately led the government to announce there would never ever be another England against Scotland match. But hey, times change. There it was last year. And this is in the studio, Jim, whatever his name is in the studio, Nick out there at Wembley giving a little
report.
report.
Nick Collins. Nick, let's start with some team news, and as I understand it, a blow for England on this match day.
Yes, it's a bit of a shame really for Michael Carrick. It would have been his 30th cap, but he's been forced to pull out because of an eye infection. Not sure that he would necessarily have started, even though he started the previous 3 England games. But with Jack Wilshere and Steven Gerrard both fit for this game, I think there was every chance they would have been the central midfield pairing. Michael Carrick probably having to wait till the second half at least. But he's a man in form. He was man of the match here at the Community Shield game.
Now, that's the kind of thing that you hope never happens to you on live television. But it obviously happened to Nick there. We shall go back to Wembley just as soon as Nick Collins tells us he's OK and fit to broadcast. Stay with us.
That's the first time he's been off script for about 20 years, and it showed, didn't it? The point is that just when you think everything's going brilliantly and you're on your little perch and you're speaking confidently to the world, it goes wrong. The big shift happens. And in some ways, we're at that position now. We're speaking confidently to the world, and we're about to fall off our ladder if we're not very, very careful. And it's for this reason that if you look at that slide, this was a conference I was speaking at, and they had a cartoonist who picked up bits and pieces from the conference. And I think this is a nice little analogy. And the missing connection is around focus on process, get things right, compliance, against thinking fast, being creative, being in the moment, understanding what an organization needs by analyzing, interpreting, and doing very, very quickly. So you've got an old model and a new model not quite coming together in learning, corporate learning. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to explore, if you like, that misalignment, the nature of that misalignment, and how we can begin to put it together. And I want to go over the elements of the misalignment with you. So the first one, if we can just look at this poster, this is the Pony Express. So, you know, I always stay a long way in the future, as you can see. This is the Pony Express ad posted up in some part of the US in the 19th century, looking for staff, basically. Their boast is St. Joseph, Missouri to California in 10 days or less. And the Pony Express was better at this stuff than any other of the many, many rider transport companies in the Midwest and the west of the US. Let's have a look at what they want. They want young, skinny, wiry fellows. Why young, skinny, wiry fellows? They're light, yeah. They're light. This is an optimized operation. They had the best horses, the best watering stations, and the lightest, skinniest, wiriest riders in order to get to California in 10 days or less. They were brilliant at it. And they got the biggest and strongest horses, and they bred them to make them bigger and stronger, and they recruited increasingly young, skinny and wiry people. Why did they say, must be expert riders? Fairly obvious. No training involved, by the way, no training or development at all. Willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. Why orphans? Why orphans preferred? Yeah, because, who cares? One orphan up, one orphan down. It's not a problem. They're not going to have any hassle from family or relatives or anyone wanting to sue or anything like that. Just, in they come. But what is the reward? Death daily, orphans preferred. Look at that, $25 a week. That would have been that would have been an annual wage. That would, for a young, skinny, wiry fellow, $25 a day was worth risking death for. So they were good. Pony Express knew what it was doing. It was extremely professional. It was extremely apt as an organization. What happened to it? Why don't we have Pony Express now? Yeah, trains came. Then telegraph came. And hey, St. Joseph, Missouri to California in 10 days or less didn't seem like a really good deal. And it was expensive. Pony Express charged a lot of money to take small amounts of information and small items from one place to another, because you couldn't weigh the horses down because they wouldn't be so fast. They wouldn't manage the 2 days. So we must be sure that we're not the kind of Pony Express guys and girls in an age when the railway is about to be launched. And the reason we're not Pony Express is because Pony Express focused only on improving and making better the little world that they knew. And we have to take a bigger picture, a really bigger picture, so that we are able to cope with both the railway and the telegraph. So what got us to this point, I believe, won't get us to where we need to be. And don't underestimate the vested interest of this point. We have spent decades, and we've spent millions and millions of dollars and pounds and reais and whatever else getting to this point. And it's very reassuring being at this point. We've got big operations. Companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars on training and development. I don't know whether it's exact parallel in the US, but they did research 3 or 4 years ago. And in the US, the investment in learning and development by corporate America is bigger than the investment in higher education. It is a colossal, almost unrealized, colossal attempt to make or continue to make organizations successfully, increasingly on a global stage. So when you say you just have to change what you do, it's not as easy as simply making a commitment or a statement in a hall. It's a big deal, and Suzanne's going to show us a little bit about that shift in Diageo. Things are changing, and changing things mean changing people. It's all about people at the end of the day. So, what are the big shifts? Let me just go through a few of them. The first one is the nature of learning linked to work. And when he said, the speaker, Brian, said this morning about an increased connectivity between learning and work, I think work and learning become one and the same thing. Learning becomes a continuous process. If learning becomes a continuous process, guess what? You can't own it. You can't manage learning out of a department when it's a continuous process. You have to completely change your role, your facilitators, your engagers, your consultants, your people pushing the notion of learning. You're defending the concept of learning. You're arguing for attention to learning. But increasingly, you won't be doing it. I was with Procter & Gamble in the US 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks ago. The head of learning and development of Procter & Gamble, Anne is getting rid of the thousands of programs that Procter & Gamble run for staff that are not business aligned. They have a whole bunch of stuff that's nice to have, things that will interest people, keep them stimulated, give them ideas, help them build new skill pathways for themselves, all of that stuff. And you say, oh, that's terrible. How could she do that? That's ridiculous. She wants to focus her entire budget on business issues and business needs. So she's pulling back literally tens of millions of dollars back into the core to invest it back into what's driving the company. So what happens then to all of those programs? What is she going to do? Just say, sorry, yesterday we did that for you, today we don't care. No, she's not doing that. What she's saying to her staff is, why are we doing this when there's so much stuff out there that is free or very, very cheap that you can access that is either as good as or a lot better than anything we can do internally? So what she's doing is curating MOOCs for her staff. She's intervening in the open learning frame, looking for learning resources which are available online. She's helping her staff use iTunes U. iTunes University has now got 325 universities putting out courses free on the internet through iTunes. She can broker, she can manage, she can direct, she can support, she can give publicity to, but she doesn't have to do any longer. And I think that little decision that she's made, which is being hotly challenged through the company, will become the obvious thing for everybody to do in 2 or 3 years' time. Why would you try to build something that is replicated out there free? Why would you try to keep your people contained inside the company when getting out there and meeting the rest of the world will become more and more useful and helpful? And if she can get those people to bring back some of their learning and share some of that learning internally, she's engaging them in a way that makes them responsible for their own learning in a much more dramatic and interesting and complex way than simply running a program of courses out of a catalogue that people could intervene and put themselves on if they wanted. So in some ways, the decision that she took to concentrate all her energies on what drives the business to make the business more successful is actually a revolution in learning in a good way, because she will be able to do more amazing stuff than the whole of Procter & Gamble could have done before, but at the same time, every member of staff will be saying, hey, you have some responsibility in all of this. It's about time you help us, you work with us, you tell us what you want. We will help you find what you need, but essentially, you enroll yourself, you get yourself involved, and we'll monitor that, and we'll reward you for that, and we'll expect you to do it. It's no longer hand-holding, it's about empowerment. And that little shift is a big shift, I think, for learning in general, as well as Procter & Gamble in particular. The second shift is this, that these stats say we work too many hours. That can't be right. Check them out this weekend. That the notion of work is going to change. And learning has to be part of the good stuff around work changing, not the bad stuff. That one of my, I suppose, most powerful learning experiences was to put myself amongst some of the people I was doing stuff to. And we still do stuff to staff. When I was in the BBC, we went to talk to some of the group who were in receipt of compulsory development because we thought it was good, because it was necessary, because we had to move the organisation on. And seeing the world from their perspective was a fascinating insight that led me to bring the entire team in to engage in a completely different way to what was seen as our customers. And what it taught me was that for many, learning is a pain in the backside. It's what you have to do around the margins of the day. It adds to your problems. It adds to the complexity. It adds to your hours at work. It doesn't solve problems. It creates problems. And until we begin to shift that focus and create opportunities to learn in the if you like, the interstices, a word that I learned from broadcasting, the gaps between other forms of work, when we learn to deliver learning wherever people want, whenever they want, in whatever form they want, we'll always be more of a problem than a solution. Even stuff that was very expensive, like high-end leadership development, was seen by the majority of people as a pain in the backside. Even if you were spending a lot of money, if it was very high-quality learning, prizing them out of doing their job and putting them into learning was a real issue. Those two things simply have to come together. They just have to merge in a way that is important. And when Brian talks about mobile devices. Things will go on mobile devices. Forget mobile devices. Well, I'm sick of people saying, we're going to go mobile, we're going to go mobile, we're going to go mobile. Of course we're not going mobile. What we're doing is saying, we don't care what you want, where you want, when you want. You do it in your way. So in other words, you can start something on a desktop, you can move it onto an iPad, you can take it home and do it on the television, you can finish it off on your phone. Who cares? The whole thing is completely location and platform and device and screen size agnostic. That is what people want. And to say we're going mobile misses the whole point about that. Simply to give them what they want when they want and allow that smooth transition between the world of work, the world of kind of in-between work and not work, the world of not work, and then the in-between world, and then back into work. Allow people to do stuff in 5 minutes here or 15 minutes there. And it's remarkable how many 15 minutes add up to hours and hours and hours, which on the surface, 15 minutes seems like nothing. But do it in those little bits. Help people see learning as a continuous part of their experience, and life is good. Hi, Ewan. Next one. Changing work. The roles that we used to have will change. This is a picture from the Second World War, women working on the McDonnell Douglas aero plant, making aeroplanes in the Second World War. And we look back on that as a kind of momentous shift in the status and power of women in the workplace that didn't completely continue through the post-war era, but it made a marker. I think we're going to see shifts in roles and changes in the way that teams operate, in the way that leadership and the so-called supervisors and the supervised, leaders and the led, that will change completely. Brian talked about the need to be humble, to be a learner, to learn from younger people. He talked about reverse mentoring. All these things aren't future speak, they're all happening today. And I'm involved in a big project to sort out mentoring, to create, we're building a software platform to make mentoring simple and straightforward for organizations, but also to make it give it a bit of structure, to have an idea what's going on. The problem with mentoring at the moment is that it's like we open a room, the door of a dark room, we kick someone in and say, go on you go, on you go. We don't know what actually happens in the room because it's dark. We don't know whether it's successful or unsuccessful, whether a mentoring session is great and brilliant and life-changing or never actually took place because the person didn't turn up. We don't prepare mentees for their mentors. We don't tell mentors what to expect. We just say, it's a great idea, on you go. Please, you two, meet together. It's going to change radically and dramatically because the notion that someone with more experience meets someone with less experience, or someone who knows a lot more about this meets someone who knows less about that, is not going to be a magical thing that we engineer to happen once every 6 months. On the contrary, it's going to be the obvious way of learning, will be a simple, easy extension of day-to-day learning. So instead of learning from your iPad, you learn from someone who knows something about something. And the idea that that is difficult or different or not normal will just disappear entirely. We cannot afford in organizations to waste the knowledge of 98% and assume that because I happen to have a learning and development hat on, I know more than you and can pull experts and put them in front of you. Every organization has massive, massive amounts of expertise which are untapped, and people, believe it or not, like sharing their expertise. They like being teachers, they like being mentors, and many people really enjoy learning, being mentored, whatever age they happen to be. In Google, they simply changed the personnel files. They added 2 lines. The first line was, what would you consider yourself to be expert at? Free text, could say what you liked. Second line, would you be prepared to answer questions on those? Would you be prepared to mentor on those? Simple, simple stuff. Down to each individual. The result was this explosion of activity around the company. People discovered skills those fields were searchable, by the way. So if you needed to know something, you could find it. Those fields led to the most amazing links between offices, between hierarchies, between different sectors of the organization, from the engineers who dominate in Google through to people who are in marketing or in HR. An incredible explosion. And all of that was just engineered by a very simple change. People want to share, people want to learn, make it happen. And suddenly you're the author of the most extraordinary increase in learning, and it cost you virtually nothing, and you had to do very little to move it forward. 4 minutes, okay. So learning is about motivation. We've got to start motivating people, we've got to get them engaged, we've got to make them enthusiastic, we've got to make them feel that they're progressing. And one of the problems with work is, the problem of overwhelming work is not that the work itself is too hard, often that may be the case, but often the problem is not an issue of the work is too hard. The issue is much more that you feel you're going nowhere. You're just doing the same old. You're just routine, crunching through emails, putting that process through again and again and again. We take the love, we take the excitement, we take the enjoyment out of what should be a great and engaging process. And the one thing that Brian also said today that I would pick up, it's about emotion and empathy and, if you like, love. Used to have this matrix of love and respect. It's not about, we often respect the place we work for. Do we love it? Do we have a passion for what we do and the place we work? Some organizations create both love and respect. Respect on its own doesn't work. Love on its own doesn't work either. We don't want kind of wild, crazy enthusiasm that comes and goes, just becomes a fad. We want respect leading to love. And I think learning is an engine of love and an engine of respect in organizations. It makes you feel alive, it makes you feel that you're contributing, and it makes you feel that you're moving forward, step by step, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. And we never, ever, or rarely see learning as making that, if you like, that mental and emotional and personal shift in people's minds, in their attitude to the place that they work for. And once we get that shift, we start to see discretionary effort, and we start to see percentage gains in efficiency and effectiveness. So there is an engine, there is a learning engine, and we need to keep the wheels going, we need to stoke the learning engine, but at the same time as making learning exciting, we've got to focus on the direction of travel. You know, we run on the rails of the organization we're trying to do it for, just like Procter & Gamble. We don't simply run ahead and go in any direction we feel like and make everything random. It's about structure, and it's about engagement, and it's about belief that I am making a contribution to this organization by teaching, by learning something new, by making my job more exciting. So learning cannot do it on its own, but it can do it as part of the bigger picture at work. And I want to kind of stop very quickly. I'm just going to have one more slide, if you'll indulge me. This slide here. This was pinned on a fridge in Hong Kong. We are innovative, resilient, self-determined, integrated among, integrated within, perceptive, inquisitive. So it explained it. Innovative means having new ideas. Resilient means solving problems. Integrated among means honest, reflective, confident. With peers and others. Integrated within, honest, reflective, confident with myself and others. Perceptive, see without being told. Where was this? This was for an 8-year-old primary kid in Hong Kong. This was the framework that the whole curriculum was being built around in this school in Hong Kong. I was absolutely astonished. How many organizations have reached that kind of level of insight, of development, of leadership as to deal with that? So my absolute final point, that if we are going to do that, we've got to make one little issue, and that's my little light bulb from Orlando. There is a light bulb. There is the ecology growing around the light bulb. I love this image. I use it all the time. Elliot Maisy saw it about a year ago, and he walked out the room and said, "Ew, that's the most revolting thing I've ever seen." But there's basically a whole life force around that light bulb. The light bulb attracts animals, they build nests, bits of stuff fall in, and anyway, it grows into this wonderful ecology. The problem the light bulb didn't realize is it's broad daylight. And we are in great danger of forgetting the fact that there's a bigger light somewhere else. You know, we can get obsessed with our own light. Remember, you are a light bulb and you illuminate the dark. You don't try and compete with daylight. There's a much bigger issue around us, and we've got to break out of being self-reliant, self-contained. We're leaky and we're engaged and we're enablers and facilitators. And if you take those messages away, I'm done. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Bit of illumination going on there, so excellent. Thank you very much. Right, so while we just transition over to Suzanne's presentation, I'd like to introduce her. So Suzanne Peacock is currently Global Learning and Development Manager for Diageo. She's been with them since 2011, but she's worked for some great names, Airbus, Exide Technologies, and she heads up Diageo's learning and development team, where she's actually now created a whole new strategy for L&D, which of course she's going to share with us, very much focused on implementing a new global learning management system. So this is probably what we're going to be hearing about today, and she's obviously very keen on her technology and how that can enable business benefit for all of us, as I'm sure we are all interested to hear. So Suzanne, we'd like to hand over to you.
Okay for sound? Yes. So my fashion's going to be, my necklace is going to knock on the light there, so hopefully it won't get too much trouble there. So thank you very much, Kathy, for that introduction. So yeah, as Kathy says, my name is Suzanne Peacock. I've been with Diageo since about 2005, I think now, and in learning and development with them since 2011. And I couldn't have been set up nicer, actually, from what Brian talked about, and obviously Nigel. So great track, Kathy, in terms of putting all of this together. And I'm hopefully going to try and give you a bit of real-life example through a case study of how some of the shifts and some of the challenges that we've heard about already today are coming through in terms of Diageo. So, we're no different to any other organisation in the fact that, change is very much upon us all of the time, but we're a very big, global, decentralised organisation, which gives us some greater and different challenges as well. So hopefully going to share some of those with you today. But before I do know that even though I think Diageo is now about 12 years old, I think, that some people don't even know who Diageo are. So I was going to start by just kind of giving you a very quick summary in terms of who Diageo are. So we really are kind of the world-leading premium drinks industry. So many of our brands, you see some of our great achievements there, and my personal favourite brand is the Tanqueray gin. So if you haven't tried that, you should do. But we have some great brands, many of which you'll have heard of, some maybe not, because obviously we are global. So these are in many different markets and many different categories as well. So maybe this starts by giving you a sense of some of the challenge that we face in learning and development. So we're split across 5 regions and we have 21 individual markets. Within each of those markets, we have a general manager who is responsible for the overall performance of the business, including the development of our people. We have we have offices in 80 countries, but we really have businesses we do business in 180. So we really are a kind of truly global business. And on top of that, that whole kind of remit, we also have a global supply organisation. So very different types of skills to, the brands and the sales and the marketing that maybe you'd associate more with Diageo, to the people who actually kind of build, make, package and ship our products. So we did have those in about 30 countries. But almost half of our business now, which has been a real shift even in the time that I've worked in Diageo, is now in the high growth markets of the world. So it really gives us huge diversity, not only in geography, but in the number of languages that we have to train people in terms of the time zones, the differences between the skills that we want in sales, marketing and supply, and also the different levels of sophistication within these markets in different things. So, I think it's, we talk about, skills needing to be developed more in Africa, but their use of technology, they just don't bother with some of the technology that we use because everything is mobile in some of those markets anyway. So our people, so we are now, again, this number's grown enormously since I've been with Diageo, but 35,000 employees now worldwide. And our guiding purpose throughout our organisation is to celebrate life every day, everywhere, and that really does permeate our work. And for as long as I can remember, we've had a core kind of capability within Diageo called Grow Yourself. So we've always recognised, certainly while I've been with the company, the importance of every employee growing themselves. So having humility, being open to learning and ideas from others, demonstrating that self-awareness, getting to know your strengths and development needs, and having that commitment, that is so important to grow own capability and experience. So we want people to be kind of committed to their own personal development because we do see that that is a great source of growth. And we also want to make sure that within that we're committed to making Diageo a great company to work with, or work for. So I'm kind of really proud of the fact that for the third year running we were in the top 25 world in the multinational workplaces for Great Place to Work. So we came 8th this year, so that's the third consecutive year running. So we're obviously doing something right. So just coming on to a little bit about, the Diageo kind of performance ambition. So last July, along with the new CEO, which some of you might have seen in terms of the press announcements, we also aligned upon a new performance ambition. And you see it here. So it's about the best performing, most trusted and respected consumer products company in the world. So that took us away from alcohol and drinks to really talk about, consumer products and to be up there with the best of the best. That's a big ambition. So behind that, we have these 6 executional focused kind of must-dos. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but the thing I really wanted to pull out was, albeit we'd had kind of Grow Yourself as a core capability for so many years, it wasn't kind of good enough, and we still needed to do more. So what you see here is, for the first time up at the very top executive level of our kind of overall company, you see about our premium brands, our innovation, our growth, the things that make Diageo what they are. Now we're actually saying that the people and everything in terms of guaranteeing those plans and the capabilities are as important. So we recognise that we do need to attract, retain and develop the best talent to enable us to deliver that performance ambition. So what I'm going to come on to talk to you about today then is what we're really doing in Diageo to meet that ambition. So before I do, give you a bit more about the business context. So we absolutely are seeing this kind of new emerging world, or emerged world, so to speak now, but there's real polarisation between our developed and our developing markets. The different markets just need different things, and we started, early on kind of with our global programs and trying to implement the things that had served us so well in the past. And we recognised very quickly that they just weren't going to cut what we needed, and these developing markets really needed different things. They had different starting points and different priorities and pressures. How do you start to talk to some of our sites in Africa when actually halfway through a call the lights go out or the technology just fails you? So, these are all kind of very commonplace, hopefully not as commonplace now as where we started, but, very commonplace pressures and issues that were really kind of dominating time and things. Increased competitive landscape. I'll talk about this a little bit more. There is a real war for talent. And I mean that in terms of, recruiting skills. And again, maybe in Africa, it's harder in some of our markets to actually recruit the skills. So you actually do have to really, and I think, Brian talked about this as well, really invest much more heavily in your own kind of capabilities of your people that you have already. In Asia Pacific, if you're not seen as a great kind of developer of talent and that people aren't going to get developed by you, then you lose out to the competition. So really, even that in itself is a key part of the employment proposition. Cost pressures. I mean, how much is it costing for us all to be here today? In a 2-day kind of conference, all of the time, the travel, the expenses, whatever else goes with it. It's a huge cost to actually start to take people out of the business. And increasingly, you know, as you get more global, you know, it's just not possible. You know, certainly our Asian markets, you know, we operate in a lot of different countries, but, you know, we're all over the place. So bringing people together, you know, is real kind of cost pressures there as well. And rapid business change. I mean, I think this is one of the key things, is how quickly can we react to, you know, these new business changes by putting together kind of programs and interventions to react to those. And I'm sure you're all aware of, obviously, the changing kind of employee demographic as well, with up to 5 generations in the workplace. So, you know, everybody expecting, as we've seen today already, many different things. So, you know, one of the things that we started to think about in Diageo when we started to really look at, you know, well, what does this really mean? And I guess one of the questions I'd say is, you know, how many of you guys book on classrooms and events and programs and go to college and, you know, universities and things when you need to do something at home? So maybe a show of hands in the last year, who has done something formal education-wise in their own personal life, outside of work? So there's a few. But if I say to you, how many of you have kind of looked at YouTube to do something, or, you know, Google? I know I was trying to put one of these hideous kind of TV brackets on the wall. Instructions were gobbledygook. It was one of these packs that was supposed to be so good because it had, you know, could fit 10 different TVs, but the problem was then you got 10 different sets of screws and God knows what else. So, you know, what did I do? Did I call somebody to do it? I turned to YouTube and found a kind of a 2 or 3 minute video that just told me exactly what I needed to do. And, you know, I even managed to put a TV up on the wall and it hasn't fallen off. So when we actually look at, you know, learning at work, and I guess, you know, many of you have talked about this already today, you know, why do we expect that people will learn differently? Is it that kind of paradigm shift we need to make around actually how people can look to live at work, learn differently at work? So I'm not going to talk too much about this, but you know, we've talked a little bit already about the concept that I don't know whether actually it's coined, but Googleization, which is this kind of search and retrieve, bite-sized learning, you know, to get that kind of multiple bits at the point that you need it, as opposed to, you know, going on a workshop or a program. You know, we've been heavily reliant in Diageo, like many companies previously, on our programs, and we've had some brilliant programs. You know, we've won awards for them, we've got great leadership programs, but really kind of shifting more to this kind of, well, when do you actually need to learn? So, you know, I found this model really useful. I'm not here to talk necessarily about the model, but the difference between kind of the training in terms of the acquisition of knowledge and the application of knowledge in terms of how you support that performance. So, you know, increasingly this is how we're kind of thinking of things. And, you know, whereas we previously used classrooms to kind of get knowledge, we're now kind of flipping that a lot more and trying to give the knowledge before we get into any kind of face-to-face situation. So that can be much more about application and coaching. So it's a shift away from these kind of one-off events to much more of an ongoing kind of learning scenario. So I've mentioned a lot about classroom, and I'm just going to talk you through a couple of examples now in terms of where we're starting to shift from some of the more traditional methods into you know, new kind of technologies and new environments. So as I mentioned, we were very kind of good at classroom-based training. We had that catalogue of courses that Nigel referred to about Procter & Gamble. And, you know, but we knew there was a whole new world out there in terms of the way that you could actually start to train people. So we took a bit of a risk, some might say. It wasn't necessarily hugely supported initially, even in Diageo. We had some senior people who just didn't think this would work. But what we did was we worked with Tata, who are here today, to actually create a 3D application where we actually trained operators on a labelling machine on the line using iPads. Now, as I say, we had the knowledge that we talked about or heard about previously on the shelf. We had all the best operating practices and everything else, but we recognised that actually they just gathered dust and they never actually went anywhere. And literally, when an operator needed to do something, it was that gut that they relied upon. But they might not have all of the knowledge that they needed to know what that gut decision would make on the next stage of the process, maybe in the packaging end or something else. So we created an application which really started to kind of test out how the machine would work. So that actually took operators through some learning in terms of how the labeler works, a bit of kind of fault finding and what happens if this happens. So you've got a winging label on a bottle, what do you do? And also some kind of root cause analysis. And what was really great is that we, along with Tata, as I say, won a bronze Brandon Hall Excellence Award for that piece of work. And it was great, you know, we reduced our green operator capability from 6 weeks to 3 weeks, which when we've got such numbers, certainly in some of our emerging and developing markets, that's no mean feat. Additionally, we actually reduced changeover times as well. So there's still some kind of numbers being crunched about this, but we did see a reduction in changeover times. But maybe more importantly, we saw a complete shift in the behaviour of how people not only learned, but actually how they went about and root cause analysis from using this. So less of the BOP manual in a cupboard and much more literally where they needed it. Similar one, and I'm going to speed up a little bit, but breakthrough performance coaching. So we talked about grow yourself. You know, coaching is a skill highly valued in Diageo. You will not go a day without hearing somebody talking about coaching. And literally, rather than having what we used to have, which was our breakthrough performance coaching kind of workshop, we've actually created, again with Tata, a breakthrough performance coaching app. And what this kind of gives you is it gives you the learning through a tutorial, but it also gives you BPC in action. So actually some of the things you can do, top tips, questions to ask, kind of performance support, so you're not expected to remember everything. But then also gives you the My Coaching, so it actually helps you then track in your coaching conversations you have with others or people have with you to kind of keep hold of those thoughts so that you can keep that as a continuous process. So moving away again from the thing that we would do in a classroom that we struggle to get traction with, to this is available on the iPads, iPhones, Blackberries, etc. Sure, thank you. So the other thing we did was we started to shift our focus. And you know, some people, when I've been to these conferences before, when you talk about learning and development, we struggle a little bit to say, well, what can we do really? And really what we've started to do as an L&D team, start to shift our focus away from, you know, the 10%. So the 10% is still really important in some areas, but how do we support that 90%? So one of the things, another thing we did within Diageo was we launched something called Mosaic, which is a SharePoint environment. And initially, it was amazing because to just see how much kind of trepidation there was around this whole SharePoint. People might share things and, you know, they might say things that we haven't actually approved. And you know, there's a real kind of control kind of feeling that said, well, you know, what will happen here? And, you know, that's really started to kind of really develop itself within the business. And we do have a whole environment now where we have different communities that bring different people together. On Nigel's point, we have kind of expert finders, so you can actually go on and say, you know, these are the things that I'm really good at. And then when somebody searches, say, who can I talk to about this? You know, those names kind of come up. So really kind of breaking down those kind of boundaries. And I've mentioned BPC in terms of, you know, that more informal, so not as a learning intervention in itself, but actually instilling coaching in the organisation. Another one, our Future Leaders Programme online jam. So we used our Mosaic platform and actually had a 36-hour kind of online jam where 22 of our senior leaders across the organisation hosted an hour or so of a jam conversation with our future leaders. And we got great engagement, great questions, and a lot more than I think we probably have got if you'd have put 22 leaders and everybody else in a room. So some really, really good results there as well, and things that we'll build on for the future. So I talked a little bit about the ways in which we're kind of trying to get learning, and this is I was really interested, and Nigel, you might have to give me the contact who you know at Procter & Gamble, because that is exactly the shift that we're looking at in Diageo. Is moving away from this focus on the materials that are freely available through whether it's these massive open online courses or, you know, iTunes U or, you know, even YouTube, whatever it may be. You know, there's hundreds of organisations out there that provide things even at cost or free or whatever. That, you know, why are we investing our resources in recreating those types of things as well? So again, you know, how do we bring that into Diageo and really invest our resources behind that? Now, I'm going to very quickly move on here. I'm probably not even going to talk about iDevelop because I know I'm short on time, but you know, we looked at kind of driving people's individual development, capability assessment, development planning to help them with that formal, but also bringing some of the informal learning interventions to bear. But the thing I want to kind of talk about here is a lot of the things we talked about, you know, are enabled by our kind of learning management system. Now, I'm talking about this at the end. Kathy introduced me saying this is one of the things that I'm absolutely right in the middle of. I'm talking about it at the end because for a long time we didn't look to invest in a learning management system. Because it definitely has to be the enabler rather than the be-all and end-all. But we did realise that we were losing because we didn't have some of the functionality that we wanted around languages, mobile, offline, and being able to bring things together for an individual to enable them to be able to kind of manage their own development. So we're in the middle of the learning management system piece at the moment, and I just want to share with you a little bit about some of the challenges that we're facing. So a lot of the things are around cultural shifts here in terms of how we actually use our system in line with some of the new technologies. So I'm short on time now, but if anybody does want to talk to me afterwards about it, more than welcome to. But it's about, how do you bridge that gap? So how do you create that framework in a way that people can access it, either formally or informally through our Mosaic communities as well, where people can share and say, I've seen this externally, I've seen this internally, I think you should have a look at it. So I've talked a lot about this already, but it is always a balancing act between what we can do globally and what happens locally. As I started by saying, the global push of one size fits all very rarely works in our organisation. So it's being able to kind of really balance what we can deliver globally, but how that is actually localised and delivered in the market to enable that kind of priorities of the market to be taken. So the push approach versus the pull approach, and certainly the pull is a lot more effective. But you need to be able to respond to that a little bit more. So that was very quick towards the end, but I mean, hopefully, I don't want to kind of tell you all that we've got all of the answers. I mean, we're on the journey too. We've started down some of these kind of shifts and got some great kind of initial kind of results in terms of some of the things we've done in terms of different behaviours and uptake of the different types of learning available. But we've still got a long way to go too. So, the challenge is still very much that we're kind of not quite at our, or nowhere near probably our destination. But there's so much more that we can do. And I think, hearing what I've heard today already just from Nigel and Brian and obviously whatever the rest of the day, is that it makes me feel that actually we are kind of on the right path at least. So, hopefully there's been some good tidbits and good nuggets there for you to take away and see if they work in your organisation.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, could have listened, I'm sure, for a lot longer to Suzanne's story there. Very interesting, and it's always nice to hear about somebody else trying to do this when you're in the middle of it as well. So what I'd like to do, we've got just under 10 minutes left. What I'd like to do is open the floor up, really, for you to ask Nigel and Suzanne, either or a combination of the two, any burning questions that you might have or anything you'd like them to clarify or share their insights. And there's hands popping up everywhere, so could we give a mic to the gentleman at the back?
Hi, this question's for Suzanne. Just curious, when you hit that LMS stage, I'm in a company now where they're frustrated with an existing LMS. There's a million different platforms trying to capture what the LMS didn't, and the LMS folks in Central are now upgrading it. Did you have some of those issues, and how did you make it work?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of issues around even getting the, probably got two microphones on now, have I? I think it's not great sound. Yeah, a lot of issues, and it actually took us a couple of years to really get to the point where we decided that the time was right to make the investment, because within the external world, there's so much talk now about whether you even need a learning management system. Now, for us, we are still, have huge compliance programs and things, and we did need that, but it became about trying to change the impression of what the learning management system could do for us. So I'm sorry I didn't get to talk a bit more about iDevelop, but the way that we're looking at that, even now within an operator population who previously wouldn't even gone anywhere near our learning management system, we're able to do things like observation checklists to make sure they're doing the right things, linking those directly to mobile solutions.
Is that an LMS, or is that a platform that you put on it?
No, that's the LMS.
That is.
Yeah. Well, it will be when we have it, but yeah, that's the idea, so that actually it becomes much more than that kind of compliance. So we're not trying to restrict everything to the LMS, we're trying to open up people's eyes to the fact that there is so much more out there, but the LMS for us still had a place.
Great, thank you. Next question. Who had their hands up? Does anybody sort of roughly up this? Start working your way up this end, so doing the next one up.
Thanks for Suzanne again. Just on the global versus local, in terms of content, is that centrally controlled, or is there input at a local level as well to make sure it's personalised for the local market?
We've got a bit of a mixed model, to be fair. I mean, we have kind of certain programs which are generally around some of our kind of core skills, so whether they be leadership or brand skills and things like that, that generally are globally created and produced, localized, not just translated, and then pushed to the markets for them to use. But we also do have that kind of pull approach whereby, you know, certainly in some of the things that we might have taken for granted in our developed world, where actually some basic skills were required, where we worked then in partnership. But we do very much have, and we've moved a little bit, I should say, on the continuum about what's done global and local, and I think we're probably getting to the right point of balance, because, you know, the markets, having been previously given autonomy, recognise that they don't have the skills or the resources to necessarily do the great learning anyway. So, you know, most of it we do try and kind of centrally kind of coordinate, but that can be very much pulled from the market as much as we can push it globally.
Thank you. Do you want to come up to the front? There's a gentleman at the very front here who's got an absolute burning question.
Thank you. And I guess this is both for Nigel and yourself. There seems to be a contradiction between, you know, what I'm driving at is what's the fundamental change for the learning function? There's a contradiction between the need to sort of measure what we do, count the hours, how many programs, control. There's a pressure from management to show up the figures. And on the other hand, the agile learning where we find learning as the DNA of the company. And for that to happen quickly, we have to let go. We have to force different business units to assume responsibility and accountability and not do it for them. And that has consequences for us. Have you seen examples of this contradiction and how that's being addressed?
Yeah, go.
I'll take the mic and stay down here. I was talking to the CLO of Wipro, which is an Indian IT services company, 150,000 staff. And I said, what is your LMS? What are the apps you use? And he said, Facebook. 95% of their staff are on Facebook. They pay staff to develop the resources. If they need training on a new technology, they ask the people who are on that technology to do it and then share it on Facebook, and they get rewarded for how many people want to access. So they've tried to create a completely decentralized model with very little centralized learning. How do you measure that then? And he said, we measure it by the company's success. The CEO knows if I'm doing my job. I don't have to tell him whether I'm doing my job. So I think that's a slightly extreme version. But the idea that you count the hours and that tells you anything whatsoever about effective learning is beyond me.
Yeah.
And we still do. We say we increased e-learning access by 12% last year. Who the hell cares? What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. You've got to find, I think you should be measuring, I think you should be accountable, but the metrics should be agreed not by you, but with the people that care about those metrics, the people who are running the business. You should be talking to the director of operations, the marketing person, the CEO, and you agree the metrics, and they are nothing to do with hours and numbers. They're to do with impact on the business.
Yeah.
And the other thing that worries me is when my bugbear with ROI models, Jack Phillips, is that Jack's final stage is extract from the work the learning and isolate it to get its impact. No, don't do that. Put it back in. Forget about isolation. I think you've got to have messy models, and you don't take full credit for anything. If you want sales to increase and you run learning programs and you engage the staff and the sales increase, you can't claim 100% of that. You may be able to claim 20% or 25%. You negotiate that. So I think one of the things we really have to realign and reassess is how we measure, and not say, we don't measure anymore. It's all so informal, but we just find new ways of measuring that the business is content with.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit long.
No, don't worry. I mean, in Diageo, we do have some measures, clearly, as we've not thrown them out, but we are trying to be a lot more focused on actually reviewing the strength of our performance and the performance of our talent. So, you know, we do have programmatic kind of evaluations, but overall, you know, when we actually set our kind of learning kind of plans, that's very much about building the talent and the capabilities that we need. And obviously a regular review of that, as you see, we're kind of, that's up as one of our top focuses now, is how are we moving forward enough on that, is really the evaluation that matters most, I think, today in Diageo, is around, are we making the shifts that we need in these capabilities to move the business forward?
Great. I think you probably, oh, sorry, you've got a burning issue. One very quick question, yeah. And then we need to wrap up, otherwise I'm not doing my job properly.
Okay, also for both of you, Nigel, you talked about shifting the nice to have with the need to have. How did they do it, the process? And maybe also for you,
Very quickly.
did you have that kind of process of shifting the nice to have and the need to have from your nice circle, from context to learning interventions?
Yeah, I mean, we did actually, because we found that a lot of our programs, until we went down that more of a kind of an individualizing an approach, meant that actually we had a high proportion of people that were consistently going on different programs. So by actually moving that down to actually what is the performance shift you need to make as an individual, I think we've definitely made a shift there in terms of being then able to assess on an individual level whether the performance has shifted by the development that was undertaken. So people are much more focused now on what is going to make that shift happen for me than the, oh, that looks like a nice program in the catalogue.
Excellent.
Can I just get the microphone just quickly?
Very quickly, very quickly.
I'll speak, I'll shout. Very, very quickly.
Come and stand by one here.
Forget about that dichotomy and create a new dichotomy, and that is what's for you personally and what's for the organisation. And have conversations around learning. If you are engaged in discussions around learning with your line manager, not just once a year, but on a weekly basis, you'll begin to define what I have to do for the company, because they want me to move in this direction, what I have to do for myself. I think that's a much better way.
Okay, well, we've had two really great views today. Thank you very much. So it is lunchtime now. Until 2 o'clock gives you plenty of time to gather up the joys that are in the exhibition and things. Could I just tell you about what's coming up in this track, just in case, because actually it does relate quite nicely to some things you've heard. So straight after lunch, we've actually got two quite thorny subjects being discussed, diversity and compliance, and how do you make those particularly sensitive subjects interesting to learn, or how do you get people to learn them, particularly something like diversity that's very emotive. And then actually after the afternoon break, we're actually talking exactly about that impact. How do you measure real impact? How do you know that what you're doing is getting embedded into the organisation and the results are there? And again, we've got a couple of speakers one from Rentokil, for whom the impact is everything. It's like running a business within a business. And Sue Husband from McDonald's, who's also talking about her very challenging situation there with the population that they have in terms of, it's a very, very large learning population, a lot of them under the age of 24. So very interesting stories coming up this afternoon. If you want some real life cases, this is the place to be. Enjoy your lunch. I'll see you at 2 if you're coming.